Hello, I am here with Colleen,
Hello.
and today we are back with Rivka Gevurtz. Hi, Rivka.
Hello.
And we're so excited to be here with you. I know we say that we've had Rivka on a couple of times, and I really encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes because I think they're pretty timeless. We've had her on to talk about religious wounding, the divine feminine. And I know for me, and I know actually for Colleen, not to put words in your mouth, Colleen, but that both of us really always kind of look to you, Rivka, as it's part of your work, we know, as well as your chaplaincy and an interfaith minister, but I always look to you as a guidepost for the times that we're living through, for definitely certain topics, and always just really appreciate your wisdom, your groundedness, your love, your care and nurturing. And so it's just always such a pleasure to be talking to you, and have a chance to have these long form conversations with you and just absorb your wisdom. So I know for me, I'm really excited to have you back again today.
Thank you.
And so Gosh, I think it's been a little bit since we've had you on, but I know today we're really excited to talk about a topic that you are very well versed in, which there'll be a multitude of topics, but lady wisdom being one of them. But why don't you just take a minute and tell the audience, who you are and what you do, and because I kind of mentioned a few of those things, and just so that we can remind everybody and to the new listeners that maybe not have heard your episodes.
Be happy to. Thank you, Robin. So, for our listeners, my name is Rivka Gevurtz. I am a student of Reiki, of Colleen's and Robin's, and have also studied under Sheila King in the 90s. So, have a long history with Reiki. But I am also an interfaith minister and spiritual director. Um, in this world, so many people are no longer tied to just one tradition, or may not have been raised in any tradition at all, but still recognize that they are beings of the light, that they are spirits, and want ways to make meaning out of life. And that's where interfaith chaplains and ministers and spiritual directors come into play, as we are people who walk alongside. Spiritual director is kind of a misnomer. We say that it's actually more like a companion, a spiritual companion, because we don't direct the people we serve, we witness for them. What Spirit is saying to them, what their relationship with the divine is bringing into their lives, and how they are navigating that. So that's the personal aspect of my work through Shelter of the Spirit, which is my private practice, where I do Reiki as well as life cycle events and spiritual direction, and different holiday programs and whatnot. But I'm now also the Dean of Academics at the Chaplaincy Institute, which was one of the two seminaries where I studied, and through which I was ordained. For the last year or so, I've been involved in leading the journey of learning for people who come to the Chaplaincy Institute from a particular faith or no faith, people who come with a blended spirituality, but who want to be of service in this time that is in such need of more spirit holding all the heartache that we're seeing around us right now. So those are the things that are keeping me busy these days.
I
Um,
also just wanted to mention, sorry, Colleen, too, that we follow your newsletter and Facebook friends and all of that. And another place of support that you really also focus on and have a lot is within the LGBTQ queer folk community.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so just because I know lots of people might be looking for guidance and support and help in these times. And so I wanted to make sure we mentioned that too.
Absolutely, yes, and so the listeners know, I'm a cisgender bi woman, and I am married to a trans man and have a non-binary adult child. I've been engaged with serving the queer community for 40 years, and my partner and I are actually celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. So we have long been engaged in the rights and the hopes and the tender places that are once again being activated by the hurtful dialogue that's going on in this country right now. So, and many of the people who have lived as gender expansive or as someone with a variety of orientations, you know, have been among those who've had the highest level of religious wounding, because too often religion has been used as a tool of oppression. You know, it is a source of healing and hope for many people, but when any spirituality becomes calcified in dogma, it causes harm to any number of people. And in particular, it has been used and misused, I should more correctly say, um, to cause harm for queer folk.
Yeah, actually weaponized.
It absolutely has, yes.
Mhm.
And is being so again, unfortunately.
And uh, I will tell you for our listeners, truly go to Rivka's website and sign up for her newsletter. Rivka, I'll tell you, every time I get the notice and email that your newsletter is out, I'm so excited to read it because it truly, like this last one that you sent out, was just, I felt like it was stability coming in. Like, okay, there's clarity, there's stability, there's hope in your message, there's truth in your message, there's kindness at the same time as the awareness of social justice, the awareness of, you know, what do you do in times like this that are so challenging for so many people and communities, and painful to both, you know, in my case, observe for my community and my friends and loved ones and family members, but also just, you know, it's painful to see in the world.
Yes, it is. And thank you. I hold that newsletter with a lot of tenderness for folks who want to find it. It's also on Substack, which is where a lot of people are looking these days to get other perspectives. So I'm grateful that people find that useful.
Yes, and just once again, her website is Shelter for the Spirit, right? Yeah, shelterforthespirit.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
I loved even our conversation before we started this, started the recording, about the stability, and that how that is holding the stability is something that we can do right now, because that is a part of this process, is that directing of feeling unstable towards us.
Right.
And that is, it was just, I don't know, it was just like, okay, it's okay if I hold that frequency of just
Mhm.
trying to stay grounded and rooted and stable. And so I really appreciated that. I don't know if you want to talk just a little bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. As I was saying before we started the recording, you know, when I'm wearing my social justice hat, one of the things that we know is that um, when authoritarianism tries to take hold, part of the game plan, as it were, is to create instability, to flood us with things like these executive orders, so that there's so many things we don't know where to turn our attention, because they know that quite often that will just shut us down. We'll feel overwhelmed and we won't know how to respond. And that's a natural way of being impacted by this stuff. But what we need to do instead is to stay grounded, to just, take in a little bit of what's going on at a time, but to keep our hearts open. One of the things that we do have to reckon with as we're holding prayer and as we're holding Reiki for all that's going on in the world is that those who have bought into the fear mongering do have legitimate fears and legitimate concerns and are frightened. And so the question is, are we leaning into fear or are we leaning into love? Are we leaning into despair or are we leaning into hope? And if we talk in terms of gods, do we worship a God of fear or do we worship a God of love? That's why so many of our great mystics have told us, this isn't the first time the world has been through something like this. Some of our greatest mystics, when you think about, the Buddha or Jesus of Nazareth or Saint Theresa of Avila, all of them lived in really troubled times. It's not that this kind of swirl doesn't happen around us. It's about how we ground, how we hold that energy, and how we hold space for breathing, for allowing the positive healing light of Reiki to enfold us and hold us, how we hold each other as an image of the divine, even when we're having trouble seeing that there is a spirit and a truth within each person who we touch. And being gentle with ourselves, because yeah, this is scary stuff. We have to own that and acknowledge that to be able to move forward.
I was
Go ahead.
I was listening to the author of the Telepathy Tapes podcast this morning. And one of the things she was asked is how do the the people on there that are a part of that process with her of the telepathic communication, how do they and they're such high frequency people. And she was asked, how do they define love? And she said, over and over again, they define love as anything that unifies. And I was like, that is so simple and so profound. Even if you think about love between two people, romantic love or the collective love, anything that unifies. And I was like, that is, and so as you were speaking, I was like, can we hold that frequency of love in general? And it's like, if I think about it in that way, anything that unifies, even in within ourselves, anything that unifies.
That's why one of the names of the divine in many traditions is compassion. It's that love that, the way I often describe it, compassion, or in Hebrew and in Arabic, rahim or rachamim. It's womb love. It's that in your gut, lift a car off of, a child energy that calls us, to connect. We are mammals who are part of the living world around us, and mammals need to connect. They need their clan, their connectors, their warmth. We don't thrive as human beings. We see this in elders and we see it in babies, what's called failure to thrive, when we don't have that connection. And so that's what love is. It's that connector. How we connect with one another, how we see the beauty in each other, and hold that above all else.
And even when we don't feel that way.
Right. Right. And that's where the compassion for ourselves is so important. Because yes, we're going to get triggered. We're going to get off balance. Getting back in balance, resting. Audre Lorde, who was a lesbian poet, used to say something along the lines of rest is a revolutionary act. We have to rest. We have to not get so caught up in all that is buffeting us And so taking the time to sit in prayer, to sit in meditation, to sit giving ourselves Reiki, all of that goes towards helping us build our resilience. We're living in a sea of trauma right now, as one thing after another, as well as historical trauma and epigenetic trauma, particularly for marginalized communities. The way that we build our resilience is through those acts of tenderness and gentleness and self-compassion that allows us to say, yes, there is the trauma, and we are bringing in the healing of resilience.
And don't you think some of it, for me anyway, is the activism I can do?
Precisely. We can't, I mean, in my younger years, I was at all the rallies, all the marches, and now at this stage in my life, my body won't let me do that. So there are other ways, when we participate in the peace grid, when we do distance Reiki as part of our own private practice, sending that healing energy, to Gaza, to Ukraine, to, the people in Sudan, all of these places that are war torn right now, but also right here. When we look at the rights that are being taken away from trans people, the rights of bodily autonomy also for women, the ways that fires have devastated folks in this country just in the last month, there's so much heartache, too much to go around. So each time we put that energy out there, whether in prayer or in Reiki, and to me, they are the same energetic. My prayers, my prayer life and my Reiki life are intertwined. And when we hold that tenderness of the world around us in our prayer life, that is activism. That is holding with a clarity of vision what is going on around us. And as one of my colleagues puts it, getting in where they fit in. What is it we can do in our own lives to make a difference?
Well, and if we believe in unity and unification, I think that's, for me, one of the things that Reiki has really helped me with is my personal unification.
Absolutely.
And to heal, since you are such a religious scholar, I believe that so often the belief that we are separate from our own self, aside from being separate from each other, the earth, from God, we are first and foremost have a belief in separation of self, that our spirit, our soul is somewhere else, and maybe someday we can get to that place if we do it right here. It again, to me, has that fear, but the belief is so powerful, it's actually collective.
Well, and the reality is those are some of the dogmas that
Yes.
have been used to control us, that have nothing to do with spirit, that have nothing to do with the teachings of any of the great masters. It's about when power and religion become intertwined. Um, the idea of original sin didn't even exist in Christianity for the first 300 years. The idea of how we are separate from the divine, that the body is not, included in the miraculous creation that it is a much later twist as a way of, controlling folk. The mystics of all traditions, are closer aligned with one another than um, the far right, shall we say, of any tradition, because it recognizes that spirit, love, the divine, however we define that which is sacred to us, is about that unitive reality. In Judaism actually never got the original sin. That doesn't exist in Judaism to this day. It also never got the idea that the body was somehow less than or separate from. One of the greatest mitzvahs is to make love with your beloved on the Sabbath, the day of rest. There are throughout the world many different ways of understanding that the aliveness we experience, whether that's through relationship with a beloved or through relationship with the beauty and awe that is our Oregon coast, or being up on Mount Hood, or petting an animal. All of that is holy. All of that is alive and is part of the unitive experience. It's not separate.
Well, as I told you before, I have just, and I know you will know this information, I have just met Lady Wisdom, and I know she presents herself in all different belief systems, spiritualities, even before religion or even organized spirituality. And I knew that you would have a lot of wisdom about her. Can you just go ahead and start? I've been talking about her, so our
Yeah.
listeners may have already heard us having these discussions. Robin's been connecting in. We've been really dialing in with her, but it's recent.
She is pushing her way back into our consciousness, but she has always been there. One of the things that the patriarchy of all traditions has been successful at doing is making us believe that she isn't the divine feminine, that she is somehow lesser than. She's actually our original mother. She's been known as Chokhmah within the Jewish tradition, wisdom. That's where Lady Wisdom comes from, is Proverbs and Job and some of the Hebrew scriptures. And she reappears in other formulations, Chokhmah being one of her first names within the Jewish tree of life. However, she long predates any of that. She is the original mother. She is the creatrix of all deities. In the scriptures that we are most familiar with here in the West, the Hebrew scriptures that start the Bible, you know, the very first chapters of Genesis talk about this creative force, this wind, that is later described in Proverbs as being God's companion at the creation of the world. Ruach, breath, in spirit, spiritus. It's all about that aliveness. It's what Thich Nhat Hanh refers to as the interbreathing of all life. That is the primordial essence. And what many people don't realize is even within the first periods of the Judaic tradition, she was still around. You see glimpses of her in the various scriptures. The first understanding of the tree of life, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which are interchangeable in some ways, comes from a much earlier tradition. The tree of life and Lady Wisdom were ways of understanding that divine feminine for 30,000 years before the introduction of patriarchal versions began coming down from the Eastern Eurasian steppes, with each of the first migrations of tribes that were sun-oriented, male-oriented, God-oriented, coming down into what was old Europe. So what we now refer to as Turkey and Greece and whatnot. and into Mesopotamia. In Eastern Europe and Mesopotamia, we've learned so much just in the last 70 years. There are images of the divine that are thousands and thousands that have been excavated. Images of the divine feminine, of Lady Wisdom. She is always associated with nature. Her symbol is the tree of life. When we talk about the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the serpent was one of her creations. It was the symbol of her wisdom as well as of her regenerativity. The tree of life, you know, apple trees did not exist in Middle East. It was more likely a fig tree or a pomegranate, something that was overflowing with seeds. A fig is actually an inverted flower, but figs and pomegranates are filled with lots of seeds, and that's her abundance, her gifts of life over and over again. You know, one of the things that we don't realize because we've been so entrained in the patriarchal version of the creation stories is that her symbols are throughout those original stories. Her symbol of the serpent, the snake, as I mentioned, but also in the very first moments of creation where it's talking about the spirit, hovering over the deep, what in Hebrew is called tahom. It's supposed to be a place of tohu vohu, of chaos. Tahom is a variation on the word Tiamat. She was the goddess of the seas. And it's a retelling of a Babylonian story where Tiamat was destroyed by Marduk, the fresh up and coming male god of the Babylonians, and her essence was destroyed and spread all over the world. The Hebrews did a kinder and gentler version, but they still brought in this idea that which was sacred has to be male, as opposed to replace as trying to replace the divine feminine. But they couldn't erase her. She has reappeared, and so when we see her in her lady wisdom apparel, as it were, her embodiment that we see her in later scriptures, the folk people couldn't and wouldn't give up the divine feminine. They recognized her in their harvest. They recognized her in childbirth. They recognized her in the ways that we connect with one another. And so we come to realize that Lady Wisdom, the divine feminine, is that intimate indwelling presence. In fact, she went from being called Chokhmah in the Tree of Life to being identified as Shekhinah in Kabbalah and in later Jewish understanding. The idea that she dwells with us, she is with us here on this plane, not just up there in the far heavens, that she is intimately related to us. So she appears under many names, in addition to the names that we typically know her as. One of her original names was Inanna in Mesopotamia as the Queen of Heaven. She carried that epithet into other areas as Ashira or Ashtoreth. We see her as Hathor in Egypt. All of them carried these same qualities of being the creatrix and mother of all of the other deities that came after them, the ones who helped birth the world, the ones who hold us when we're hurt or in labor or struck down. Part of the reason the serpent is one of her symbols is because of its regenerative properties. That she faces all that the world gives her, and she comes through and she reinvents herself and invites us into that circle of life that invites all living to recognize that, there is birth, there is struggle, there is rebirth, there is death, there is rebirth. Each of these ways that she presents herself when she appears in Proverbs, she's kind of cajoling, I've been here all along. You couldn't get rid of me. you know so she is ever present, and she reemerges. Her qualities were passed down to Mary in the as becoming the Blessed Virgin. That was my first relationship with her, as growing up as a Catholic child. She was my source and my presence. And she also is considered a representative of Lady Wisdom. Miriam in the Hebrew scriptures is considered a representative of Lady Wisdom. She's the one who speaks truth to power, who tells, watches over Moses until he's collected by the daughter of Pharaoh. So we see glimpses of her throughout every tradition and every time. But she is the wisdom of the ages. She is the source of life, and continues to be in relationship with all understandings of divinity.
And I think the word wisdom, we can have a particular idea of what that means. And so I think because when she came in a couple of weeks ago, it's like she just downloaded, and all of a sudden it was waking up within me and understanding that she is the co-creation of creation itself.
Yeah.
And so I would love to ask you this, because it's a personal question that I struggle with, because I always had a really deep relationship with God. And then, as I started on a more spiritual journey, I struggled with the term God, and lately have really realized, well, I'm missing that being, but I don't know how to reconnect. And when she came in as this co-creation, it gave me a feeling of like, okay, maybe I can inch back that way now and meet God on another level.
When we look at the concept of unitive consciousness, these attributes, whether we define it as masculine or whether we define it as feminine, are just that. They are attributes of something that is beyond our way of comprehending that which is holy. It's, the Jewish sages of 2,000 years ago, about 1,800 years ago, actually, used to say that anything you would say about God is wrong because it's incomplete. Because there is no way our little human minds can totally grasp all that the divine is. It's, whether we recognize it as an energy, whether we recognize it as anthropomorphized, male or female. In fact, the sages of the Talmud recognized that that first story in Genesis, the one with the sea, it's a different story than the second chapter, which is the Adam and Eve chapter. In the first chapter, it talks about the divine breathing into Ha-Adam, the earthling. It's not male or female. And in fact, the Talmudic sages said it was neither male nor female. It was both. It was all genders in one being. And that what in all of the creating, what wasn't good was that this being was alone. And so it became in the second chapter, two separate beings, the side, not the rib. And in fact, the early understandings mirrored what the Greeks thought, that the first primordial being was male on one side, female on the other. With the spine being the point at which we were divided. But from a spiritual perspective, the yin and yang, we all have components of male and of female energies within us. So this understanding that when the divine says we will create them in our image, that primordial source was also more than any one gender. So yes, we can recognize a relationship with the divine male, which is often called God. And we can recognize a relationship with the divine female. But in the same way that we're different things to different people in our lives, to my child, I'm mom, to my beloved, I'm his wife. But by the same token, I'm much more than that. And the same is true of the divine. So yes, inviting the divine feminine in is a way of reconnecting with the divine masculine. And the divine masculine is also more than what the calcification of traditions has allowed him to be, in the same ways that the calcification of traditions has kept women from being all they could be. And in both cases, the keeping of binaries has prevented people from being all of who they are. In some ways, when we look at that first and androgynous being, that's the representation that people are struggling with right now. How to personify who they are, who the the source of life is calling them to be, regardless of any outward appearances, who their soul is and how they want to live into that reality.
I remember one of the things you said last time when we were talking about a similar vein of conversation around it, and you said all genders and no genders within
Right.
divine, and it helps so much with it because it I think you're right. It's been so anthropomorphized that it is hard almost to separate
Yes.
that aspect, regardless of, like you said, which belief system you might have around how you see God.
Right.
But then when it was also none, I was like, oh, yeah, there's none and all within the same idea.
Absolutely. And in fact, uh, one of the more radical thoughts that some of us are having in this day and age and that I've been sharing with people is that in the same way that individual, the Ha-Adam, was all and none, we get a clue about the divine in that same section. The name in Hebrew that is used for God in that first chapter is Elohim, which actually is a plural. It means gods, not God.
Hmm.
It's a plural rendered singular, the original they, them, in a world that wants to make everything binary, that isn't binary. And so that's one of the things that we're invited into is, what is it we um, lose when we try and make something into tight little boxes of either or, light, dark, male, female. That is a later creation that does not allow for the unit of reality that is the tapestry of life all around us.
And then at the same time, it's interesting because we also do have to return to the essence of what we call the divine feminine
Right.
and the divine healed divine masculine.
Mhm.
Might be a better way of that balance of creation, because the divine feminine, the energy of that, the creator source, has been, you know what it has been
Right.
over the last amount of years. I think that's another piece that some of us all kind of look into and feel into, of what does that all mean. But it's also the essence, and not taking away from that the beauty of that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the reasons I think the divine feminine reemerges over and over again throughout history is for that need to bring balance, that need to recognize that you can't have light without dark. And in the same way, you can't have an expression of genuine masculinity without an expression of genuine femininity. Again, the yin and yang of the Eastern traditions, that understanding that all is within us, and how we balance that determines how we see each other, how we see ourselves, how we hold the sacred, which is all around us. One of the things about the tree of life that is so empowering is that in the one pillar you have masculine attributes as they are understood in that cosmology of the Hebrew world. In the other side, pillar, you have the feminine attributes, but you have the unifying center pillar that leads directly to beyond Keter, beyond the crown chakra, to what is referred to as the no-thingness, the Ein Sof of the divine. And coming down, it anchors into the earth, into Malchut or Shekhinah, the indwelling presence of the divine that fills creation. The understanding is that the tree of life, as above, so below, that we are all built in this way that has all of these attributes. That's one of the ways in which we are made in the image of the divine, is that we too have attributes of chokhmah, of wisdom, bina, knowledge. We have attributes of chesed, loving kindness, and gevurah, strength, and on and on and on. And that we come down to a foundation, yasod, that grounds us in this world, which is made up of constructs that allow us to have language to communicate something to each other. I mean, that's really the point of religions, is to try and say, here's what I think I understand about spirit moving through me, and I need a language to talk with you about it. And sometimes our languages get in the way.
So I think I'm gaining a clarification. So when we work with the tree of life and the imagery from the Kabbalah of the energy of the earth rising and going up the central channel, left channel, and the right channel, and out and beyond. So I think what I just heard you say is one side is the masculine, one side is the feminine, and then the central channel is both.
Yeah, it's the unification, yes. And in fact, the place that they come together, the most central place that they come together, is Tiferet, the heart, which is also, Tiferet is also a word for beauty. When we bring it all together, when we understand the interconnectedness and the unitive reality of it, that's when we can see the beauty in it all. I mean, one of the things about Lady Wisdom that is one of her oldest names is the Bat Kol, the voice of the divine. The daughter of the voice is a more literal translation, but it's, she's considered the voice. And where we first see her is in the burning bush. When Moses in the Hebrew tradition stumbles upon this bush that is aflame but is not burned, it is believed that is the manifestation of the tree of life on this plane, and it is she who speaks through it. So when we bring all of that together, and we see other things similarly in other traditions. When we look at Kuan Yin, her earliest manifestations were as a male deity when she was still in India. And over time and arriving in China and Tibet and the more eastern areas of the Orient, she takes on a feminine, you know, way of being in the world. She becomes in many ways very similar in her attributes to how we define Lady Wisdom and how we define Mother Mary and how we define Shekhinah, the source of compassion that holds all and heals all, and who we turn to when our hearts are breaking.
And I know that I've heard of Lady Wisdom also referred to as Sophia.
Sophia is the Christo Gnostic languaging for her, and she's also as Sophia, she reverberates back to how the Queen of Heaven was defined on Crete. When we talk about Athena as the goddess of wisdom in Greece, there's a direct lineage between the Adriatic Sea understandings of the divine feminine that is echoed throughout Mesopotamia as well. This understanding that she is this source of wisdom, she is the source of beauty. And it's only when those northern tribes come down and make Zeus the head of the whole tribe of deities that she is reinvented as having come from his head, being born from the male head as opposed to in Mesopotamia, the feminine being born from the man's rib. In both cases, they were already there. They were already the goddesses of wisdom in their Ashir, in whether it's Ashira in Canaan or Athena in Greece and parts of the Adriatic. So her wisdom, her divine wisdom, is generative, it's creative, it's inviting in the ways that we connect with one another. The matriarchal traditions of old Europe and of Mesopotamia, Sumer, Ugarit, and all of those regions were very egalitarian. You see no war and also no hierarchy in any of those traditions until the Northerners bring down this idea of a sun god and storm god, along with weapons and whatnot. And so she has always been a source of compassion and a source of wisdom in all of her iterations. And they couldn't obliterate her completely in any of the traditions because she is so needed. We need all of the attributes of the divine. That's one of the things that the Tree of Life teaches us, is that we are each made up of wisdom and knowledge and compassion and strength and the ways that we set boundaries and the ways that we are fluid with one another. All of these are divine attributes that we embody.
I just have been called to Rivka, which is interesting, is that, we, of course, with the animal Reiki are continually called to the Tree of Life and noticing in the different places that the Tree of Life, we're not a scholar, and studied it and things like that. So it's just kind of through our own research. But what is interesting is not too long ago, I was watching an engineering or science show with Luna, my daughter, and they have that's how he described the tree of evolution. It was the tree of life is what he said, and here's the tree of life, and it was showing the evolution. And as you were talking about, this wisdom and knowledge, which was such a big piece of what came in as a part of the animal Reiki, those two aspects, the wisdom and knowledge, and we didn't know how ingrained it was with all of these things, although we did see it over time because it's pretty universal when it comes to the tree of life. but then it was within that one too. And so that's really interesting because there is a wisdom of nature, and then yet there's the knowledge as well within nature too. And I don't know why I felt called to bring that up, but it just kind of kept kind of like, wow, look at it, it's there as well.
We get these hints everywhere we look. When we compare our thumbprint to the circles of a tree that has been cut down, when we see the brachia of our lungs, and it reflects the ways that the trees are formed. You know, we see all of these symbols repeating and repeating, the labyrinth as a tool for spiritual centering and awakening. We see it in different forms throughout cultures, literally around the world. You know, we see the serpent as a source of wisdom and regeneration, literally around the world. You know, we see the tree of life and its many permutations in Celtic traditions, in Asian traditions, in North American traditions. You know, there are all of these hints that surround us, that are there to remind us that yes, we are part of a living entity that is the earth. And she is our mother, and she's been understood to be a source of interconnected, interbreathing, you know, the breath of all life, you know. All of that is our reminders that we aren't alone. We are part of something much grander, much bigger, that we are not separate from the divine, we are held within it. And so when we know that, when we can recognize that even though there are storms, even though there are fires, even though there's this political strife in this moment, all these things do pass, just as the Lady Wisdom teaches. There, you know, there is life, there is death, there is rebirth. We see often in some of the early Christian Gnostic understandings of Christ as being a personification of Lady Wisdom. They actually talk about, let's see, for instance, Hildegard of Bingen, who was a early Christian women mystic, you know, talked about the mothering of God, not just God the Father, but God the Mother. You know, we see the same thing in Hebrew scriptures where Moses is described as suckling the Hebrew people, you know, as the wet nurse for the divine. You know, gender as we define it today has become so calcified, and the understanding throughout many traditions is that there's a whole variety of ways in which we live into the reality that is sacred. In fact, you know, the Talmud, you know, 2000 years ago, you know, to about 1600 years ago, I identified 6 different genders, not just 1 or 2, as a certain, you know, executive order would have us believe. And there has never been just 1 or 2 because, you know, there are people who have always been intersexed. We know that chromosomes do not just come in 2 varieties. They're not just XX and YY. There's XY, there's XXY, there's XYY, there's, you know, there are so many different permutations. There are people who present their whole lives as one gender only to find out that chromosomally they are a different gender. You know, there are all of these ways that we are given reminders that we are unique and we are also part of something that is miraculously interconnected.
Well, we're so interdependent on everything, the whole earth.
Yes.
Years ago, in one of my journeys, you know, talking about this being the planet of cooperation, and everything has to cooperate in order to thrive.
Yes. When we can make space for one another to be our whole selves, that's when we are able to see one another and see each other as sacred beings and be in that cooperative space. When we are taught instead that life is finite, that resources are finite, that there is never enough, as our current system of capitalism would have us think that, we have to hang on to and grasp. That's when we shut ourselves off. The Hebrew word shefa means flow, and there are understandings of this in Eastern traditions too, that we have to have a flow of interconnection, a flow of resource, a flow, because when we stop it up, when we dam it up, nothing can flow. The good cannot flow. The healing cannot flow. Our interconnectedness gets, taken away, because it's in the reciprocity that we are able to manifest that unit of consciousness and that interbeing reality.
I like that aspect that you just said about the idea that things are finite, because I think that that really is catching my attention, because also with the current system, we are living in a system that is not in balance. And so there is this idea that obviously out of balance, things are not in a fully reproducing cycle.
Right.
But that if we can maybe, if we're in that, and we always talk about in communion with the earth rather than in dominion of the earth, where we are living in that symbiosis and that ecosystem, that there is a different idea, because it's regenerated, it's regenerative, it's not finite, it is that continuous cycle.
Right. Absolutely. One of the most basic tenets that is put forth in the early scriptures is that we're called to be shomrei adama, guardians of the earth, protectors of it, stewards of it. This whole idea of manifest destiny and dominion over didn't come over, even, exist until, much later. The idea that we have a right to just take from the earth. Our Native American traditions have long known that's the sin. That, yes, we borrow from, we share, we give thanks, for, and that's part of that flow, is, recognizing that, yes, I might need to in some traditions, kill a deer or what have you, but they always thanked the source of life within that creature that is going to give them sustenance. We've become so disconnected from the world around us, with our artificial lighting and our, nice warm houses and whatnot, that we've kind of lost an understanding of that interconnectedness. And, very few of us live on farms anymore and know even what a plant that is safe to eat and what isn't, know how to, cultivate the earth without stripping it, and so there's this reciprocity that only happens when we are in relationship with one another, with the earth, and with all of life, that we actually get to be more in awe. We get to go, wow, this is sacred. This is beautiful. This is how we are supposed to serve, is fa- face to face, panim va panim is how it would be said in Hebrew. This idea that, we have to be able to see each other. We have to be able to recognize the sacredness in all of life around us and give thanks for it.
Well, one of the things that I think has also been a part of maybe the creation of chaos is the human shaming. And I think that starts with self and self criticism and all the ways we can find to do that. And all the things as humanity that we do wrong. And ultimately, in my experience and what we talk about is from the animals telling us is that human beings love. We love greatly, even when we can seem as if we're polarized, even if we have differing ideas, that ultimately there is great love in our human nature.
Absolutely. That is the way that we are most like what is sacred. That we have this capacity to love, that we have this capacity to have compassion for one another. When we lean into that, we can make miracles happen. That's the gift and the hope. But when we look at oppression and all forms of power over, those are really manifestations of fear. We are grasping, we are blocking the flow because we're afraid that we aren't enough, that we don't have enough, that, you know, we are less than, as opposed to recognizing that, I'm a sacred being, you're a sacred being. The light of Reiki, the light of life, the light of love flows best when we bring our light together. And that it's when we shut that off that we um, grasp too tightly, that we create power dynamics that otherize individuals, that otherize the planet, that says, my needs are greater than your needs. And we're in a very toxic level of that right now when 8 people have, what is it? Any day, every day it shifts a little bit, somewhere between 60 and 80% of all of the global wealth. That is a dis-ease within the system of flow. The haves and the haves not is part of that fear. Those who have not wanting to give up because somehow they will be diminished, as opposed to those earlier societies, the matrifocal societies, where everyone shared everything. They shared in the raising of the children. There were, people of all genders holding roles that were useful to support the communities. When we can be in that kind of symbiotic relationship with one another, recognizing the gifts this one has and the gifts this one has, that together we hold together the community, the family, the clan, that there can be ways of being in a regenerative healing dynamic if we can let go of that sense of fear that leads to power over.
So I know you're teaching, you have upcoming workshops in the Divine Feminine. Can you talk about that? Because I also feel that that is, first of all, the Divine Feminine is powerfully coming to the earth. Like it's here, and I almost think that's some of the pushback. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and then also in that whole discussion, how that also can bring us back to the authentic divine masculine, because I think the imbalance is affecting everyone.
Right.
It's not just one gender or the other or the multiple, of it. So can you talk about that? And
Certainly.
because like the how do we get from these kinds of conversations? And that's what I think your workshop might be focused on.
Right. Divine Feminine Wisdom, an introduction, is a class that I and a colleague are going to be teaching at the Chaplaincy Institute the weekend of, sorry, the dog is moving the desk. That I'm going to be teaching the weekend of June 13th and 14th. It'll be a Friday and a Saturday. And it grows out of the understanding that we don't know our history of our relationship with the divine feminine. And we also don't recognize how that imbalance is affecting all of us. And so part of the time is going to be about looking at those original manifestations of the divine feminine in her many permutations, how our understanding of her has changed through the influence of the patriarchy and what we need to do to reclaim that. But we also are taking it to, so what is she calling us into today? What is the need that is being whispered that we need to make space for to hear in greater detail about how we treat the earth in a time of climate crisis, of how we treat people who have been marginalized because of manifest destiny, which was, you know, a use of the church and the power constructs of Europe to take anything which felt, foreign to them. The ways that, women have been subjugated, in repeated ways over the millennia to rob us of our power. How do we reclaim that? Who are the poets and the artists and the activists who are showing us ways to re-enliven our reality, that we are part of a divinity that is not based in just patriarchal models, but includes the divine feminine. And moving beyond that, as one Christian theologian refers to it, into the omnigender of the divine, how we move into this way of recognizing the divine qualities within all peoples and in all genders. What does that call us into in terms of how we heal a planet that is on the brink of destruction and grieve what we have done and how we have allowed power constructs to hold us back, and how we can be part of the healing of relationships with planet, relationship with the greater than humans, and relationship with our human siblings. And that'll be the way that the course is constructed, is that there'll be a couple of asynchronous classes, what are called Moodle classes, that people come be working on in the weeks leading up to that weekend. And then we'll come together for a variety of interactive things, ranging from ritual to utilizing the arts, listening for the voice, what is being called forth within each one of us, because we each hold that divine wisdom, and how is she speaking to us within our own realities. So it will be a very rich several weeks leading up in terms of the readings and the assignments, and then a culmination of spending Saturday and Sunday in deep reflection together and playing together and being in ritual together. And it's all virtual. It's all virtual. The Chaplaincy Institute is a virtual seminary. We stopped being a brick and mortar school with the pandemic, and found that it allowed more people to be part of the healing of the world when they didn't have to fly to any particular place in the country. So it's the weekend is done all on Zoom.
Well, and it's just fascinating. One of the things we've found with teaching online is how it's so, the energy, the power, all of it, the love is within us. And it can be accessed and communicated and taught and received through just the I mean, the vehicle is technology, but it's really the energy fields
Yes,
that we're still receiving, and finding out that it can be done across the world. It doesn't have to be
absolutely.
in
Absolutely.
person right next to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. We have students all over the country and sometimes from other countries who participate in our classes. And this particular class is an open enrollment class. You don't have to be a student of the seminary to take this weekend. And we'll also have one in May that is countering oppression through sacred practice, through spiritual care. And so that too is an open one, so that people who are grappling with this moment of how can I be of service, we'll be spending a weekend with that in May, the weekend of May 10th and 11th. And what, as you said, what we're learning doing this virtually is that we create a community that isn't isolated. We create a community of folks who are dedicated to bringing healing to their own lives and healing to the world. And for some folks, that is going to be in ways that most directly work with oppressive and more oppressive situations affecting marginalized communities. The others, it's going to be reaching into the divine feminine and seeing how she is inviting us into supporting, different communities, and especially supporting the earth and our more than human relatives. So being able to do this, in ways that it makes it accessible to folks wherever they are is really quite a delight.
It's huge. Well, one of the other pieces of the divine feminine that actually Kuan Yin came in to teach me was about receiving,
Yeah,
and that is out of everything. One of the number one things for women in particular is that um, we've been so trained to only give and to be
precisely.
overgivers that we've actually lost the ability to receive. And then the other one that she talked about was how, um, and this came through in one of the articles I wrote, was how we've lost the ability to receive our own answers because we've also been so trained that there is an intermediary
Right.
that will tell us what our spiritual answers are rather than how to receive them ourselves.
Yes. We have so much noise around us, literally and figuratively, that we can't hear that still small voice within our own wisdom. Lady Wisdom is part of us. She is that voice that speaks to us and through us. So I think that's one of the most important gifts that we have to open ourselves up to. In fact, one of the most amazing gifts that I received, when we did Holy Fire initiation, was a meditation that brought in multiple manifestations of the divine feminine for me. Um, as I was in that meditation and in others all around the time of my ordination, was visited not just by um, Lady Wisdom in one manifestation, but collectively she was joined by in her manifestation as Shekhinah, in her manifestation as Mary, as Kuan Yin, as Kali, that fiery, protector, but also as embodied women, Mary being, an embodied person as well as a symbol of the divine, but also Miriam, who was the prophetess of the Hebrews, and Theresa of Avila, a 15th century mystic, and Theresa of Lisieux, an 18th century mystic. All of these women entities, all of these manifestations of the divine feminine collectively held me in the Holy of Holies and nourished me and fed me and cared for me and showed me that that is as much a holy act as the giving. We are so trained to just give, 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 give until our bodies give out. And I did that for many decades. What their message is, her message in all of her manifestations, is that we are worthy to receive, to be held, to care for ourselves, spiritual self-care as well as physical self-care. We can't continue to give out to others from a dry well. We have to, as spiritual workers, as light workers, take the time and the energy to resource ourselves, to be resourced by the sacred, so that we can be present and be of service in the larger world, in our families and whatnot. It is a sacred act to take care of ourselves. And that's, I think, one of her deepest lessons for us.
Well, I think that that is so amazing, and that is because Colleen had said, some of the how-tos, whatever your avenue is, to be able to do that as well. And then because this is, where our basis of spiritual exploration comes from with Reiki, is one of the things, again, that we can do. And in helping, because sometimes, like you were saying at the beginning, we can feel a little helpless, but if we can take care of ourselves, maybe even after our well is full, we can then help to allow other people to drink too. And so I love that, because it, through Reiki and other ways as well, of course, but through Reiki, that is one of the ways that we can at least start somewhere to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Hold ourselves in compassion and hold each other in compassion.
We've been talking about Reiki as a path to spiritual awakening this whole past month, and what I love about today's discussion is I feel like a perfect example of how it's an ongoing discovery, exploration, and development, because I've learned so much today just from it. It's like all these pieces are coming together from years of, oh, I have this understanding from here, and I have this understanding from here, and then we find out, because the tree of life in particular was one of those that all four of us authors of the Animal Reiki individually had a relationship with, that we had not connected with each other until we were asking, what is the energy of this Animal Reiki? And it came out the tree of life, and we were, curious, like, well, how does that work, and why? And then the meditation came through, that then when we saw the image of the tree of life and the Hebrew traditions online, we saw it, we were able to Google it and see the Kabbalah image of it, and that connected with the meditation. And it's been this ongoing discovery. And then today, with Lady Wisdom coming in, and everything you've just brought in around who she is and connected with the tree of life, and even the story of the burning bush with Moses, because we think of that also, holy fire, as part of that energy and tradition. It's all literally flooding in right now. And I love that idea of, at the beginning with spiritual awakening, We want to know what it is, and I want it right now. I want it right now. And then you discover it's really a lifetime. Like you say, you were raised Catholic, I was raised Catholic. I loved being Catholic as a child. I loved my relationship with Mary and Jesus and some of the saints, and the church that I attended was St. Mary Magdalene. And so all of those things, I loved it. And then through the course of life, having the different experiences of my own spiritual awakening, and that it's ongoing. You know?
And it is. I mean, one of the things that as I was finishing seminary, I had this moment in that grasping part of me. It was like, there's still so much I need to learn. And then in her wisdom, she reminded me that yes, and this journey continues, and you will continue to learn, and will continue to grow in spirit. That this is the journey. It's not the destination, it's the journey. And we are on this sacred journey with each other and with ourselves and with all that is.
And how it applies in our daily life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do we utilize it? I'm always thinking, how does this apply? Like, how does it create more, well, functionality is one thing, but also that inner peace, inner clarity. And I think every day right now, particularly, but it's been for, well, really all my life, but right now it's very loud, is what can I do? Like, what can I do today? How can I make a difference, and how can I help? And I really believe that we are co-creating our reality
Yes.
by having even these discussions, by having these types of, how do we connect? How do we connect with one another? How do we indicate to one another we love each other, and we love the earth, we love humanity, we love it all, and even regardless of how we feel.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things about Kabbalah is the understanding that um, when the universe was created, the ways that the divine made space for creation was to put parts of the divine self in these sacred vessels. But the divine self was too great, too big, beyond control. And the vessels all burst. And so the understanding in Kabbalah is that there are these shards of the sacred that infuse everything. And that when we explore something that is hard, that is crusted over with the gunk of life, that is, calcified and made hard in its, understanding and its dark, oppressive ways. When we can help to release that spark of the divine within that, that is how we grow the power of the divine and reunite us into that unit of consciousness where the light is released and infuses everything rather than being locked away in what I would define as fear and control. When we can help open those up and bring compassion to the dark places, that is sacred and holy activism in and of itself. The ways that we lift up the light and bring the light to the surface, the ways through Reiki that we enfold each of the people we touch in light, allows that inner light in the dark places of them to be reunited with the divine flow. That is just as important as walking in a march. We still have to walk in marches, we still have to write our elected officials, and we still have to protect those who are not being protected. But part of that is through the sacred act of holding open the light for it to help heal us all.
Wow, Rivka. I think that that's actually just such a beautiful place to go ahead and, wrap up. And of course, thank you so much, as always, for your just profound insights and wisdom and all that you do as well. Um, and help guide us all through these times. Um, can you go ahead and just say how people can get a hold of you and also where your courses are? Because I know you said they were through the Chaplaincy Institute. So how do people find that?
Right, so the website for the Chaplaincy Institute is chaplaincyinstitute.org. And that has the whole calendar of all of our upcoming classes and notes which ones are open enrollment as opposed to ones specific for the seminarians. And for my own programs, you can go to my website, which is shelterforthespirit.com. And at the moment, I've been so focused getting ready to launch these two new Chi classes. Chi is our affectionate name for the Chaplaincy Institute. That I haven't planned any whole group classes, but I've got a couple of different churches I'm going to be doing teaching opportunities at in later in May. So some of those things will come onto my calendar, and periodically, I do individualized work with this. I always invite any of my Reiki clients and any of my spiritual direction clients. Often I'll marry the two, and based on what somebody needs. Sometimes they want the session to be held within Reiki energy. Other times they might say, you know, I really need this, focus for our session, but would you please send me Reiki, or for this issue, you know, the two sort of flow in between each other. I do have a new program that I am preparing to start that isn't launching just yet, but it's going to be an interspiritual spiritual direction circle, which will bring in different spiritual practices along with that listening skill of where is the divine calling us to, and that information will be going up on my website shortly. So
And to join your newsletter as well, because
yes,
we both of us, I know, always enjoy your newsletter. So you can
great,
do that at shelterforthespirit.com too.
exactly.
I like your term interspiritual.
Interfaith so often is understood as being just within the Christocentric world,
Yeah.
even though it never really has been. Interspiritual recognizes that not all spiritualities are tied to a religion or a dogma. And so I'm leaning more into that in my work. I get my personal sustenance from the Jewish tradition of my family, but my work I have found is really in the interconnectedness between spiritualities. And so interspiritual has become my go-to word.
Yes, I definitely, that captured my attention in some of your work. Because as you maybe don't remember, but I remember thinking, oh, the domain, I actually got the domain name Interfaith Reiki, thinking that, oh, I should grab it right now while somebody else, for somebody else that can use that, and thinking of it for you. And then I really like that interspiritual term, is, to me, makes so much sense because it's inclusive
Right,
and includes religions. Because even though, I personally am practicing an independent spiritual path, I honor religions as well. So I don't want it to sound like I don't, just isn't my path.
right, exactly.
Mm.
Okay.
Well, Robin, anything else, and anything, Rivka, you want to say as the final thing?
Just continue to hold Reiki energy for all of the places in the world right now that are suffering. we have, the peace grid, but in each of our small ways, we can be making a difference to the brokenness that surrounds us in this time.
Well, I think believing in us is one of the first ways. And
Absolutely.
for me, that's one of the things I have to, again, I balance sometimes how I feel with what I actually believe in my heart. And some of the days the feelings can get like over the top, and other days, and even then I still know that one is a feeling, the other is the truth of me, is that I do believe in the love of humanity and that people love greatly, and that's what we can promote and that's what we can do. And I have to start with me.
Right. We have to start right here.
Right here, and invite that Lady Wisdom. She's like, I have been here all along, just now. Thank you so much for all your teachings about her. I just, I love how all this works. It's so fascinating, endlessly. And I know, we had already scheduled this time together before she came in such a big way.
You
It
know.
is, it is definitely a time for reclaiming,
Mhm.
all of her manifestations and all of the ways that the divine
So
source
speaking of all the different ways, she came in through a TikTok video. So true transparency here. I was like, who is that? And then all of this, it's just like boom, came in, and she is, I mean, she's on it with me. She is like, okay, you need to know me. And now that she's part of the Tree of Life, I'm just absolutely like, and the voice.
Yes.
Oh, so good. Well, thank you so much, Robin.
My
Anything?
pleasure.
No, I think let's go ahead and just say goodbye to the audience. And as always, thank you all so much for listening and just holding space for these conversations. So I'm just grateful for you as well. So thank you, Rivka, and we will see you all next time.
Yes, thank you. And I also just want to add for people that are listening, we truly embrace community. And if any of you that are out there listening, needing that, know you can tap into that energy and receive it just by inviting it. It's okay if you can only be, part of community from listening from afar or whatever. Just know that you're included. So
All
thank
right.
you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.